There's a stretch of Ohio down in the Hocking Hills where waterfalls spill straight over sandstone cliffs. The whole forest goes gold every October. And you can still buy wooded acres with a cabin on them for a fraction of what a scrap of Colorado or California would cost you. And here's the part that'll make you tilt your head. People are moving here, to Ohio, on purpose. The same Ohio everybody spent 30 years leaving. Because just a few years back, this state was bleeding more than 30,000 people a year to the rest of the country. And now, quietly, for the first time in over a decade, more folks are moving in than moving out. Nobody's really talking about it, but the ones already doing it figured out what most of the country hasn't caught on to yet. You can still own a home and land here for money that just does not exist on the coasts anymore. So today, I'm going to drive you through 15 real Ohio places people are actually landing in. Real towns, real prices. The real reason each one, and one honest catch every single time, said right out loud, because you deserve the whole story before you fall in love. Now, I want to be straight with you from the first minute, because that honesty is the only reason this channel is worth your time. This is not a gold rush. Nobody is flooding into Ohio. It's a quiet turnaround, real but modest, the kind of thing you only notice if you're watching the numbers. And here are the numbers so you know I'm not making this up. According to the U.S. Census Bureau's 2025 population release, Ohio's net domestic migration came in around positive 11,926 people in 2021. Just 4 years earlier, in 2021, that same number was negative 32,482. That's a swing of more than 40,000 people in the direction of Ohio in a handful of years. The state's total population grew by roughly 39,889, and Ohio wasn't alone. For the first time in about 15 years, the entire Midwest posted positive net domestic migration, somewhere around positive 16,000. That's historic, in a quiet way. The middle of the country stopped emptying out. Put that next to home prices, and you see why. The national median home price is sitting around $394,000. Ohio's homes and land sit far, far below that, especially down in the Appalachian Southeast and in the older industrial cities. When a family gets priced out of a coast where a modest house costs 7 figures, and they find out they can own free and clear in Ohio for a fraction of that, the math starts making the decision for them. And no, before you ask, Ohio is not one of those no-income tax states. It has a state income tax. They're cutting it down, and that's part of the draw. But it is there, and I'll never tell you otherwise. This is a real turnaround with real trade-offs, and the trade-offs are exactly what makes it trustworthy. The place at number 3 sits on real acreage in Amish country for less than a lot of folks spend on a pickup truck. We'll get there, I promise. But we start somewhere even cheaper and a whole lot more surprising. Number 15. We start up in the northeast corner, in Youngstown, in Mahoning County. Now, Youngstown is a name that carries some weight. This was a steel town, one of the great ones. And when the mills went cold, back in the late 70s, this city lost more people than almost any place its size in America. So you'd think it would be the last place anybody would choose. But picture this, a solid brick 2-story house, the kind they built 100 years ago when they built things to last. Hardwood floors, a real front porch, a yard with an old oak in it, and a price tag that stops you cold. In some of these neighborhoods, a home like that can list for less than the price of a decent used car. We're talking figures that dip well under the national median home price of roughly $394,000. And I mean well under, sometimes a tenth of it. Here's the wow fact that ought to reframe the whole city for you. Youngstown sits almost exactly halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, about an hour to each. So you can own a house here outright, no mortgage, and still be a short drive from two major cities with two major job markets and two major airports. That is a kind of freedom coastal money can't buy anymore. The reason people are landing here is plain. They got priced out somewhere else, they can work remote or drive to Pittsburgh, and they wanted to own something instead of renting forever. Youngstown lets a regular income buy a real house. Now the honest catch. Two of them, actually. First, these are old homes, and old homes have old bones. You will very likely be looking at a new roof, updated wiring, maybe the plumbing. Budget for it. Second, the winters here are gray. Not brutal like the snow belt further north, but long and overcast, the kind of gray that sits on you from November clear into March. If you need sunshine to feel like yourself, factor that in with clear eyes. Now, I'll point out a catch like that on every single place on this list. Not to talk you out of the move, but because the people who actually pull this off aren't the lucky ones. They're the ones who did their homework before everyone else caught on. Everything I check before I trust a place like this, what the town's really like, what the taxes really run, what you can actually build there, I keep in one place called the Complete Cheap Living Field Edition. It's the first link in the description if you want to get ahead of this now. More on that later. For now, back to it. Number 14. Roll south, down along the Ohio River to Portsmouth in Scioto County. This is where Ohio starts to fold up into hills, and the whole feel of the state changes. Portsmouth sits right on the river, with green ridges rising up behind it, and a set of enormous painted murals along the floodwall downtown that tell the town's whole history. You can find a sturdy, older home here, 3 bedrooms, real character, for a price that would barely cover a down payment out west. And if you want a little land, the hills just outside town hold small acreage parcels that cost a fraction of anything comparable in the mountains people usually chase. The wow fact. That flood wall I mentioned, with the murals, it's there because the Ohio River is both the reason this town exists and the reason you have to pay attention. Which brings me straight to the catch, because I'm not going to hide it behind the pretty part. Portsmouth, and a lot of these river towns, sit in a floodplain. You pull the FEMA flood maps before you sign anything, and you ask what flood insurance runs. Some lots are high and dry. Some are not. The difference is everything. This town also went through hard years with the opioid crisis. Harder than most, and it's still climbing back out. But it is climbing. The cost of living is genuinely low. The river views are real, and for somebody on a fixed income who does their homework on the flood question, Portsmouth is a lot of home for very little money. Wait until you see the town that made its fortune on something you probably ate off of as a kid. Number 13. Just up the river in Columbiana County sits East Liverpool. And here's your wow fact right up front. This little city was once called the pottery capital of the nation. At its peak, the potteries here made a huge share of all the dishes in America. The plates your grandmother had, there's a real chance they came out of a kiln in this town. Today, East Liverpool is quiet, and that quiet is exactly why the prices are what they are. A brick home with good detailing, the kind of place that would be a boutique listing in a trendy town, can be had here for a number that feels like a typo. Small, walkable, riverfront, and cheap. The reason a certain kind of person moves here is the pace and the price together. You can own free and clear, live simply, and watch the river barges go by from your porch. But the catch is the honest twin of Portsmouth's. This is a river town, so flooding is a real question on the low-lying lots. And the population has been shrinking for decades, which means the job market in town is thin. You want to be bringing your income with you, remote work or a pension, or savings, not counting on the town to hand you a paycheck. Get that part right, and the dollar goes further here than almost anywhere. Number 12. Now we swing all the way to the northwest corner, to Toledo in Lucas County. And this one is not a shrinking secret. This is one of the hottest affordable markets in the whole country right now. Here's the wow fact. In 2025, real estate platforms flagged Toledo as one of the most in-demand, fastest-moving affordable markets in America. Not because anything flashy happened, but because the homes are cheap, the cost of living is low, and people priced out of everywhere else. Finally noticed. Toledo sits right on Lake Erie at the western tip, with a real waterfront, a genuinely good art museum, and neighborhoods full of solid, affordable brick homes. You can still buy a good house here for well under 6 figures in a lot of neighborhoods, a fraction of the national median, with a real yard and a real garage. The reason people are coming is simple math. It's an actual city with actual jobs on a great lake, and you can own a home on a normal income. The catch is written in snow. Toledo sits at the edge of the Lake Erie snowbelt, and the winters bring lake-effect snow and a lot of gray. And like every older city on this list, the cheap housing stock is old, so you inspect carefully and budget for repairs. But a real city, on the water, that a regular family can afford to own in, that's rarer than it should be. Now let's get back into the hills, where the land gets cheaper and the story gets quieter. Number 11. Back down to the Ohio Valley, to Steubenville, in Jefferson County, another old steel and river town, tucked into the folded hills where Ohio meets West Virginia and Pennsylvania. The views along the river valley here are genuinely pretty, especially when the hills turn in October. The wow fact is the price of space. Because this town shrank when the mills did, you can find a big old home here, the kind with high ceilings and a wraparound porch and rooms you'd have to furnish over years, for less than people spend on a new SUV. Grand old houses, everyday prices. Picture it for a second. You're standing on the back porch of a house that costs you less than a car, coffee in hand, and the whole Ohio River Valley is laid out below you with the morning fog still burning off the water. That view used to belong to steel executives. Now it can belong to a retired couple on a fixed income who did their homework. People land here for the cheap home ownership and the easy reach of Pittsburgh, less than an hour up the river, close enough for a hospital, an airport, a ball game, without paying Pittsburgh prices to live there. That's the quiet trade a lot of these movers are making. Live cheap in Ohio. Reach the big city when you need it. But the catch is the familiar pair for these valley towns. The low ground floods, so you pull the flood maps and you buy on the high side. And the local job market in town is thin, so you bring your own income, remote work, or a pension, or savings. There's a lot of beauty and a lot of house waiting here for the person who comes in with eyes open. And the next town has a bridge shaped like a letter. Number 10. Now we head into the middle of the state's Appalachian edge, to Zanesville in Muskingum County. And Zanesville has one of the strangest, most charming wow facts on this whole list. It's got a Y bridge, a bridge shaped like the letter Y, where the road actually forks in the middle of the river. You can drive onto the bridge and, halfway across, choose which bank you want to end up on. There are only a handful of bridges like it on Earth. Zanesville was a pottery and glass town too, sitting right where the flat farmland starts to buckle into the Appalachian foothills. That means you get the best of two worlds: affordable homes in town and cheap wooded acreage just outside it. A house on a few acres here, with trees and a little breathing room, runs a fraction of what that same setup costs almost anywhere with hills and water. Folks move here for the space and the character, and because it's an easy shot to Columbus, about an hour west, if you need the big city sometimes. That's a pattern you'll notice all over this list. People buying cheap out in the affordable counties, but keeping a real city within a lunch hour drive. You get the quiet and the ownership without giving up the hospital and the airport. The catch is the thin local job market, so you want your income coming with you. And, again, The older housing stock that needs a little love before it loves you back. Budget for the roof. Look hard at the wiring. But if you want land under your feet, a porch to sit on, and a genuinely interesting town to drive into on a Saturday, Zanesville punches way above its price. The next stop was running this whole state before Columbus was anything at all. Number 9. Follow the Scioto River down to Chillicothe in Ross County. And here's a wow fact to sit with. Chillicothe was the first capital of Ohio. Before Columbus existed as we know it, this was the seat of the whole state. The downtown still has the bones of that history. Beautiful old buildings, a real main street, the kind of place that feels like somewhere. Chillicothe has something a lot of these towns don't too, which is real, steady employment. There's a large paper mill and other industry here, so unlike the shrinking towns further up the river, there are actual jobs to go with the cheap homes. You can buy a solid house here for well under the national median, with the option of acreage in the surrounding Scioto Valley farmland. That combination, cheap homes plus real jobs, is exactly why people are quietly moving in. This is the sweet spot a lot of these movers are actually looking for, and it's rarer than you'd think. Plenty of cheap towns have no work. Plenty of towns with work aren't cheap. Chillicothe gives you both in the same zip code, and it wraps them in real history and real farmland. The honest catch is the floodplain along the river bottoms, so you check which side of the map your lot sits on before you fall for a listing. And there's the plain fact that a working mill town smells and sounds like a working mill town on some days, depending on the wind. That's the trade. But for the person who wants a paycheck and a porch in the same place without a coastal mortgage crushing them, Chillicothe is one of the smarter buys in the whole state. And the next one is older than the state of Ohio itself. Number 8. Keep heading southeast all the way to the river, to Marietta in Washington County. And the wow fact is right there in the founding. Marietta was the first permanent settlement in the entire Northwest Territory. This is where the settling of Ohio literally began, back in 1788. It's one of the oldest towns west of the Appalachians, and it looks it in the best way. Brick streets, riverboats, grand old homes, a college, and a downtown that people drive hours just to spend a weekend in. Now, Marietta is a little pricier than the shrinking towns, precisely because it's so lovely and people know it. But it's still a fraction of coastal money. You can own a piece of real American history here, walking distance to the river, for a price that would be laughed out of the room in New England. The reason people come is the quality of the place. It's beautiful, it's walkable, it's got a college town's culture on a small town's budget. The catch is the river. Marietta sits where the Muskingum meets the Ohio, and it has flooded, seriously, in living memory. So you pull the flood maps, you learn which streets stay dry, and you buy accordingly. Do that homework, and you've got one of the prettiest small towns in the Midwest for the price of a starter condo somewhere else. Number 7. A little downriver sits Gallipolis in Gallia County. The name is French, and that's your wow fact. Gallipolis means City of the Gauls. It was settled by a group of French families in the 1790s who came all this way expecting a paradise on the Ohio River and got a whole lot of hard frontier instead. The town survived anyway, and today it's a quiet, pretty river town built around one of the nicest public squares you'll find in Ohio, a real park green right in the middle of everything. Down here in Gallia County, you're in genuinely cheap country. Homes in town go for modest money, and out in the county you can find real acreage, farm ground, and wooded hillside for prices that would barely rent you a parking spot in a coastal city. Quick thing before I give you the catch on this one. If you're getting something out of this, if you're the kind of person who wants the honest version instead of the hyped up one, do me a favor and tap that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach other folks who are quietly dreaming about the same thing you are. That's all. Now, back to Gallipolis. The catch here is the trade you make for that price. You are on the river, so flooding is on the table. And you check the maps. And you're rural now, truly rural. So the nearest big store or hospital is a drive, and the local job market is small. This is a place for the self-reliant, for the person bringing their income with them. But the land per dollar down here is honestly some of the best in the state. Number 6. And speaking of cheap land, let me take you to Meigs County. If you laid out every county in Ohio by the price of its land, Meigs would be sitting way down at the affordable end. This is deep in the Appalachian Southeast, all rolling wooded hills and hollows and winding country roads, with the Ohio River forming the whole southern edge. Here's the wow fact. In parts of this county, you can buy wooded acreage, real usable land you could put a cabin or a homestead on, for money that sounds made up next to what land costs out west. We're talking a small place on several acres of trees for a number that a used truck would eat whole. The property taxes on rural Ohio land like this stay low too. So once you own it, holding it costs almost nothing. Imagine walking your own property line for 10 minutes and still being on your own land the whole way. Trees you planted nothing to earn, older than you, a creek in the bottom, deer moving through at dusk, and not a payment to a landlord ever again. That's the life this county sells, and it sells it for less than most people spend on a vehicle. People move here to get off the grid a little, to have space and quiet in their own patch of woods without needing to be rich to do it. A lot of them are folks who spent years believing land like this was only for the wealthy, and then found out the truth is the opposite down here. The catch is the isolation and the terrain. The roads are curvy, and some turn to soup. When it rains, the county is one of the quieter ones in the state for jobs and services, and the nearest full grocery run is a real drive. You'll also want to ask hard questions about water before you commit, whether there's a working well, how deep it runs, whether the ground drains, because a new well can cost you a real chunk of the land price. Solve those, and you've got a private kingdom of Appalachian forest for the price of a car. Number 5. Cross over to the Southwest Hills to Athens County, and this one comes with a wow fact you can only appreciate after dark. Athens County has some of the darkest night skies in the entire eastern United States. There's an actual dark sky preserve down here. On a clear night, the stars come out so thick and so bright that people drive in from 3 states away just to stand in a field and look up. If you've spent your life under city glow, the first time you see a real Milky Way from your own backyard, it will stop you where you stand. This is farm country and Amish country both. Gentle hills, tobacco barns, and quiet. A farmhouse on real acreage here runs a fraction of coastal money, with taxes that stay reasonable out in the rural townships. The reason people land here is the peace and the space and the price all in one. The catch is that this is remote, and services are thin. You'll drive for a real grocery run. The internet can be spotty in the hollows, so you check that carefully if you work remote. And there aren't many local jobs. But if the dream is dark skies, open land, and a slow life you can actually afford, Athens County sells it cheap. And now we come to the places you've been waiting for. Number 4. Here it is, the edge of the famous country. Athens County, along the Hocking River. You probably know the name from the college town, but step outside it and you're in some of the prettiest wooded hill country in the state. All forest and ridgeline, and little valleys with creeks running through them. The wow fact is what your money buys in trees. You can find wooded acres here, 10, 20, 30 of them, with a modest home or a cabin for a price that would get you a bare 1/10 of an acre in a mountain town out west. Real forest, real privacy, real ownership for a fraction of what the Rockies or the Smokies charge for the same feeling. People come for exactly that. Space and beautiful country they can actually own, plus the culture and hospitals that a university brings within reach. The catch is 2-part. The low ground along the Hocking River floods, So you pull the maps and buy high. And the local economy leans on the university, which means it has a seasonal, student-driven rhythm to it. But for wooded acres, you can call your own. In genuinely gorgeous country, Athens County is the doorway. Number 3. And now the one I promised you at the very start. Holmes County, the heart of Amish country. And the wow fact here is genuinely one of the most remarkable on this whole list. Holmes County is home to one of the largest Amish and Mennonite populations in the entire world. Not the country, the world. You drive these back roads and you'll share them with horse-drawn buggies, pass hand-built barns and roadside stands selling pies and furniture, and feel time slow down in a way that's hard to describe until you're in it. The land here is farmed with a care you rarely see anymore. Rolling green hills quilted with small family farms. And the towns, Millersburg, Berlin, Walnut Creek, are clean, prosperous, and calm. You can find a home on real acreage out here, genuine farm ground, for less than a lot of folks spend on a new pickup truck. Modest homes, a few acres, a barn, all for money that would barely dent a coastal down payment. The reason people are drawn here is the simplicity and the safety and the sense that life is built around something solid. The honest catch is that you're moving into a very particular way of life. One built on quiet and tradition, so it fits some people down to the ground and chafes others. Tourism brings weekend traffic through the pretty towns. And because the Amish community values and buys farmland heavily, the truly good acreage can be tight and competitive when it comes up. But for a life that's calm, cheap, and genuinely rooted, there's nowhere else in America quite like Holmes County. Number 2, and now the place we opened on, the Hocking Hills in Hocking County. This is the crown jewel, the one that makes people who've never thought about Ohio in their lives suddenly start looking at listings. Sandstone cliffs and gorges, waterfalls that freeze into blue columns in winter and roar in the spring. Hemlock forest, so deep and green, it feels like somewhere much further from home. And in October, the whole region turns gold and red and orange until it looks unreal. Here's the wow fact. The Hocking Hills is one of the most visited natural areas in the Midwest, drawing millions of visitors a year to hike its gorges and chase its waterfalls. People come from all over the country just to spend a weekend here. And you can live here. You can buy wooded acres with a cabin tucked into these hills. Wake up to that forest every morning and own it for a fraction of what a cabin in the Smokies or Colorado would run you. That's exactly why people are moving in, chasing the cabin in the woods dream at a price that dream costs almost nowhere else. But the catch on this, one is different from all the others, and it's the most important one to hear. There's nothing wrong with the land. The catch is that everybody's starting to figure this out. The Hocking Hills has become a booming short-term rental and getaway market, and that's pushing prices up faster here than anywhere else on this list. Prices that were a quiet bargain 5 years ago are climbing hard now. The window is still open. It is not going to stay open at these numbers forever. All right, let me talk to you straight for a second, because you've seen enough of this list to know it's real. The places are real, the prices are real, and the only thing standing between you and a home of your own, free and clear, is usually doing this right instead of waiting until the secret's out and the prices have already moved. Here's what I've learned. The folks who actually make this move aren't the lucky ones. They're the ones who walked in knowing more than the person selling to them. That's the whole reason I built the Complete Cheap Living Field Edition. So you can be that person. 3 guides, cheap land, cheap houses, and the state-by-state notebook on what each place really costs you, taxes and all, plus the worksheets you print and carry right to the county office, so you know exactly what you're buying before you hand over $1. Separately, it'd run about $45. Together, it's $29.99, and the worksheets are free in the bundle, and they are linked right in the description below. Now, our last one, and it might be my favorite. Number 1. And for the last one, I want to take you somewhere that isn't a waterfall, isn't Amish country, isn't a bargain basement Rust Belt steel. I want to take you somewhere plain. Knox County and its county seat, Mount Vernon, right in the middle of the state. Now, on paper, there's nothing that jumps out about Mount Vernon. And that is exactly the point, because this is one of the most quietly livable small cities in Ohio, and almost nobody outside the state has ever heard of it. Picture a real downtown, a genuine old-fashioned town square with a bandstand and brick storefronts and a movie theater still lit up at night. Rolling farm country all around it. 4 real seasons, green springs, warm summers, gold falls, snowy winters. Actual employers in town, so there are real jobs. A college, good schools, and homes, real, solid, family homes on real lots, for prices that sit comfortably below that national median, a fraction of what that same life costs on either coast. Here's the wow fact, and it's the quietest one on the list. There is no catastrophe here, no dying industry, no floodplain swallowing the town, no secret that makes the cheap price a trap. Mount Vernon is just a good, ordinary, functional American town that most of the country forgot to notice. And forgetting to notice, it is the only reason it's still affordable. And that's the truth underneath this entire video. The people quietly moving to Ohio aren't settling for less. They're seeing something most folks miss. While everyone else keeps fighting over the same crowded, overpriced corners of the country, these folks figured out that a plain, honest place with cheap land, 4 real seasons and their own name on the deed, beats a gorgeous rental they will never ever own. The map is turning quietly back toward the middle of the country. And the ones moving now, before the crowd shows up, are getting the last of the truly cheap land in a state that's about to get discovered. You don't need the coast. You never did. You need a place you can afford to actually own. So there it is. 15 real Ohio places, real prices, the real reason each one, and every honest catch spoken out loud the way it always should be. If this earned your trust, that's the whole reason I make these. Go ahead and subscribe, because I go looking for these places so you don't get burned by the fakes. And if you know somebody who spent years quietly believing a home of their own was out of reach for people like them, send them this. 1. It just might change how they see the next chapter. Do your homework. Pull the flood maps, ask about the well and the winters, and the property taxes for that exact county, and never ever buy a home you haven't stood inside with your own 2 feet. This isn't financial, tax, or real estate advice. The migration numbers and prices change and get reported on a lag, so verify every number for your own situation before you move a single box. Your affordable Ohio acres might be out there right now. Go find them.